What's up, Swolgers? Thank you for joining me on this video today, where we're going to talk about the reaction and reviews that I received on my last video, which was who is the real king of the deadlifts, Eddie Hall or Thor Bjornsson. Now, if you want my full thoughts and input on the matter, you can check out that video. I'm going to drop the link in the info and comment section below, so check that out. But I just want to talk about some of these comments that I've been getting because I think a lot of them are downright ridiculous. First off, I appreciate everybody that engaged with me. I appreciate you watching this video right now. And if you don't know anything about me, I am an athlete, I'm a coach, I'm a promoter, I'm the U.S. Strongman State Chair for Florida. So my interest at heart really is to grow the sport of strongman. And that's why I like having some friendly debates about different topics from time to time, because it keeps us all engaged and it gets a way for people in the community to talk about subjects and things in strongman that we care about. So nothing in here is out of hate, but I do want some people to maybe reconsider like what they're thinking, you know, and like maybe try to see it from a different lens, because it's just reality and distorted delusion. Okay, so who's the better deadlifter, Eddie Hall versus Thor? Let's go at the start here. We remember the first guy who broke the barrier of a 4-minute mile, or do you remember the guy who did it a second faster? Eddie earned himself a spot in the history books. Therefore, Eddie is the king of the deadlift. Thor's going to have to pull an awful lot more than 1 kilo to be anything but a footnote. That is crazy. So I've gotten time and time again, a lot of people are making this comment about like nobody's going to remember Thor Bjornsson because he deadlifted 501, or that nobody's going to remember that he broke that record. First off, this is probably the biggest, most highly debated topic that's ever happened in strongman. Okay, to just say that like nobody's gonna remember Thor deadlifting 501 is absolutely insane. Not because he broke this legendary record, what's seen as really the king of records in strongman itself, but his stature among everything else. I mean, world's strongest man, multi-time world champion, Arnold, has not won the Rogue, but world's ultimate strongman, you know, has all these incredible accolades. So to say that like Thor's going to be, as a deadlifter, that's nothing but a footnote is just absolutely insane. Now, in this video, I compared Eddie's deadlift to the 4-minute mile, and I'm actually going to retract that and rewrite that. I think the 4-minute mile of strongman was actually Benny Magnusson's 1,015-pound raw deadlift, because you went from Benny being the second lifter to ever pull over 1,000 in any way, Andy Bolton having done it in a suit previous to that. I believe it was 1,006. Since then, there have been, I think, 20 people to deadlift over 1,000 in competition. So that's really one thing that's more of the 4-minute mile anyways. So Eddie Hall will always have his place in history because that was an epic, legendary moment. But it's crazy to say that Thor's deadlift is just going to be a footnote because it's 4 years later, and even people that think his lift was illegitimate have very strong opinions and seem to pop their heads out of nowhere to say, no, it doesn't count, blah, 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 blah. You know, other things to consider too. What is a competition to begin with? A lot of people are saying, oh, this was during a live meet, therefore Eddie's was during a live meet, and Thor's was not. Therefore, you know, Eddie's is the real deadlift. So this opens up like a whole bigger discussion about what is going to satisfy you if you have this take about it wasn't a real competition. What satisfies you for what's a real competition and what isn't, okay? Now, things we need to consider about Eddie's deadlift is like, yes, live competition in front of a huge arena. And I made this point in the video that I think there's an advantage to having a huge roaring crowd pumping you up before you go. That's a massive advantage, on top of, you know, some disadvantages of having all those other people around you and having to be in that live setting. There is some stress to it, but it's not entirely just harder because of that, right? You know, when we consider all these things, such as, you know, Eddie's only 2 hours away from home, slept in his own bed, used his own deadlift bar, right? Like, there was very controlled conditions that was outside of his control. What I thought was really interesting, and maybe I talked about this in the last one, is that when Benny Magnuson deadlifted 1,015, he just did that on a whim. He did not know or decide that he was going to do that competition until 2 days before. So Stefan Solvi Peterson actually came over with him to do this bench press and deadlift meet that was at the Ronnie Coleman Classic in 2011. So Benny was not, there calling the shots in the same way that Eddie Hall was. So let's kind of rope this back in. What makes a competition? So, I guess questions to be asked is how many people needed to be there? So let's say Thor did this meet and there was 6 other people that were doing a deadlift meet with him. Does that make it legitimate? I don't know. I have a feeling that a lot of people that are saying this are still going to gripe and say oh, is it his home gym? There weren't enough people, blah, 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 blah. So what's going to satisfy you? If there were 2 other lifters going for it, does that satisfy you? I don't know. Does this mean that Tom Stoltman's stone record that was done under the exact same circumstances in his barn with his brother and nobody else, does that mean that that stone record is illegitimate? Because you're saying the same thing here. So Thor was on a live international TV schedule. So at meets, right, you have a timetable where you are going in between other people. Thor was going every 10 minutes. Eddie got to call his own rest periods. So, end of the day, Thor's event was a live scheduled event because it was on programmed international TV. Eddie's Halls could have taken as long as he possibly have wanted to, and it still was in a competition. So, again, we're just kind of opening a door to, what makes a competition legitimate for you, right? Now, somebody said whoever has the best suit. That's not true. Some other people came into this discussion and started talking about, let's go ahead and talk about the bench press. Somebody said Gene Rychek was the first to do an equipped bench of 1,000 pounds. Doesn't mean he's the end all of benching, especially when Jimmy Cole pressed 400, which honestly I poked the bear a little bit and I said, no, Julius Maddox is the real king of the bench. Julius has a 782 raw bench press. And that's really crazy considering that if you're looking at the geared bench press record, which is 1401 versus the raw bench record, 782, we're talking about almost double the record, okay? So that is literally 80% more equipped than raw, right? So when somebody says they both use the deadlift suit so it doesn't count, deadlift suits, if you know how to use them correctly, are pretty close. It kind of equates out the same. Where a bench shirt, you have to train specifically to use a bench shirt to get the most out of it. Versus a deadlift suit, a lot of people can throw one on right away and automatically enhance and improve their deadlift. There's not this massive learning curve. So it's crazy to say this because when you're looking at Trey Mitchell's most recent raw deadlift record, 1,034 versus the current geared record in a deadlift suit, half Thor, 1105, 501 kilos, it is 6% more. So to say that they both use the deadlift suit so neither counts, that is so silly, right? Somebody says nobody cares. Deadlift is the most boring event in strongman. Yeah. Crazy. Some of these are just nuts. I personally hope that soon, and I think it's going to happen, that somebody's going to come and hit 505 Hooper, or Thor's going to come in and smash 510 at least. Now, another interesting comment that we got here is somebody says, you use the spectacle argument to justify a guy breaking a record with no crowd and no competition in the same building. A spectacle is a show for people to see and not just record. Okay, so spectacle, we have to think, this is one thing I talked about in my last video, is that a spectacle, strongman especially, started as a big spectacle where it's part of vaudeville acts and in front of audiences to entertain. So we could only do live shows at that point in time. You talk about people like William Bankier or even Louis Cyr did certain elements of circus strongman with a big crowd in front of them. When we fast forward to the modern age, this, in my opinion, still counts as true strongman, Thor's lift at least, because it was done probably in front of more live eyeballs through TV than any other moment in strongman history. and not probably, it has to be. I mean, just think about what other event in strongman history got as much live viewership as Thor Bjornsson deadlifting 501 during COVID, not too long after the height of his Game of Thrones peak fame. I mean, there can't be anything that people have seen more than that, right? Like, even casuals to the sport were watching that on TV because it was a Saturday morning when nobody was going out, staying in their homes, and ESPN had nothing else to show. So again, that is a spectacle. So to say that it wasn't because it was like just recorded and put on the internet later, it was on live international TV in dozens, potentially hundreds of countries live. So absolutely crazy. Toe the foe. Trey Mitchell is the new king. King of the raw deadlift, I'll give you that much. Speaking of which, Trey Mitchell at the Giants Live World Championships this past weekend said that he thinks he can do 505 raw. That would certainly change the game. That is for sure. Here we go. Another person again. This is also an interesting thing where you would have like somebody comment like 4 times, like 4 different things, because they're clearly very salty about this. I broke my high school discus record in practice, but never in comp. I don't deserve that record, and neither does Thor. I mean, that's just a silly argument. You know, this was not a training day for Thor. This was an event that was peaked up to and in lieu of the world's ultimate strongman in Dubai. I think it's just like, why are we leaving out the fact that this competition was going to happen anyways? Plus, let's hit this point again of every single other person had the opportunity to stage this same exact event. So talking about this guy's like, oh, I broke my high school discus record in practice. Like, if you were to go out there and say, I'm making an official attempt with all the eyes on everybody right now, if everybody else agreed that you could create that circumstance and they could try it too, it would become legitimate as long as it was verifiable, right? Of course, track meets are just completely different than powerlifting meets, but this just kind of comes back to, what do you think is required to be a legitimate competition? Because if you were saying, hey, I'm going to go for this record and I invite all of you to do it at the same time, like, we could come to some sort of agreement. Hey, even though these guys all tried on a Tuesday afternoon, which is out of the middle, like, we all agreed that this was legit. So, whatever. Some of these are crazy. So somebody says, you are a little bit late to discuss this. I don't think so if I've, gotten several hundred comments on these videos. Just interesting. Somebody said also, if they had secretly added 5 kilos to Eddie's 500 kilo lift, I have no doubt that he would have lifted it on that day. 501 always seemed so lame to only try and beat it by the smallest amount you can, because Thor was desperately trying to prove he was better than Eddie. Okay, so a few things we have to remember here. More on this comment in a second. Eddie literally almost died pulling 500 kilos. I mean, watch it. He literally almost freaking killed himself, which is what makes part of that lift in that moment so freaking epic. Now, when we're talking about this, I do think that Thor's 501 is the record, but that in no way takes away from what an unbelievable moment that Eddie's 500 was. Incredible. Will go down forever as one of the greatest moments in strength sports history. It just will. But so what? Coming back to this thing, like, so what does it matter that Thor only broke it by 1 kilo? Now, I think a lot of people are having a hard time remembering too that immediately after Thor hits this record, they announced the boxing match. Core Sports said, hey, we're putting on Thor versus Eddie. They both got, I believe, $1 million to fight each other in the boxing ring. So if you wanted to set the record and you wanted to maximize views, clicks, hype, etc., then yeah, maybe break it by as little bit as possible so then you can just garner more views and more attention on this product, because it makes the beef and the feud seem so much more close and so much more real. But once again, records are meant to be broken. Who cares? This is why it's so crazy for me that Giants Live keeps pushing 505, 505, 505. I think somebody would get to 505 faster if they let them do 502, which opens to 503, 504, 505. I think you would have a faster route by letting these guys inch it up than having to take, that 4-kilo jump from here on out. Thor has cheated in the past to get the win, so I don't really trust his 501 kilos for that reason. I did, in fact, ask this person how did Thor cheat. He didn't say anything to the sort. Can't get past his previous cheating to win, and when you factor it was a home gym lift with possible fake plates, it just does not seem credible. Possible fake plates. They were literally weighed on international live TV. Whatever. Thor should do it in competition to end this controversy once and for all. Again, what do you believe that a competition is? Like, how many people do you need? Like, what timing, what location? Like, nobody has any of these answers. Like, somebody needs to come out and determine, like, what the hell that means for them, all right? So, I also think Thor is massively overrated due to him being in Game of Thrones at the time. Brian Shaw is a much better and more successful strongman than Thor could even dream of, and is a much nicer person as well. It doesn't matter who's nice or who's not. Like, I may personally like somebody like Brian Shaw more because he's a nicer person, but that doesn't automatically discount somebody's lift. I know some people in strongman, gigantic assholes, incredible strongman, right? Some people that have won world championships are dickheads. Okay, they're incredible strongmen. Doesn't take away from their accomplishments. Okay, same. I mean, that's just what it is. I think if Eddie had competed in World's Strongest Man 18, he would have won again, and then Thor would have never even won any World's Strongest Man titles, as Thor has had nothing but poor showing ever since in World's Strongest Man. 18 was also one of the weaker years when Thor won. So you literally cannot make that argument. It is just complete speculation to say that Eddie Hall would have won if he had competed. That's like saying, well, if he came back now, he'd win. Well, you can't prove that like in any way whatsoever. So just because you think that if he were to come back or if he did that in 2018, he would have won, that's not an argument. Like, what are you thinking? We're not talking about the facts here. If he hit 501, why didn't he keep training and do over 501 in a comp setter where no one could say anything after? It's because he did it in lockdown, and then by the time everyone was questioning him about the legitimacy, we were out of lockdown and he backed away from it. Yikes. Again, so he had that boxing match, and another thing that, like, this guy doesn't lift or understand strongman, because if he did, he would understand. Thor was having a lot of health problems. We're talking about Bell's palsy, and the bulk and size that guy grew up to at that time to hit that record is so insanely unhealthy for any human being. We're talking about massive damage and just pain to your joints, to your organs, to your heart. That's a very short shelf life for a person if you were maintaining that much size. So he did decide to cut down, and I have a feeling that probably sooner than later he was going to do that anyway. So, like, that's why he didn't just keep training. Like, as if that's so easy. Oh, he could have just, maintained a basically physically impossible condition to maintain to just easily go on and set this. Like, if he, it's just so easy. He could have just done that. Like, that's ridiculous. Anybody that's ever bulked seriously and has walked around at a really heavy weight, like, I got up to 250, 260 at one point. Like, I was strong as shit, but that was a totally unsustainable weight to be at. Crazy. Can you imagine being 450 pounds? Holy crap, that guy probably slept like shit. Definitely still to this day uses a CPAP. Probably slept horribly. Felt awful. I mean, was eating all day long probably. Like, sometimes when I'm up to eating 3,500 calories to gain weight, it seems like so much food I'm shoveling in my mouth. Now imagine doing 4 or 5 times that. Ridiculous. So that's just clearly somebody that has not ever, like, taken strength training seriously or understand the problems that go through, these strongmen. I do think it's worth noting that when Eddie almost killed himself and Thor walked away and celebrated and have a conversation right after. So these are just some things. Again, I want you to consider some other perspectives on some of these things if you had any of these opinions that I just called out on, but I am open to more conversation. If you think I have a bad point, I would love to hear from you. Nothing but love. If you're somebody who's actually out there getting stronger and pushing yourself as hard as you can, we're on the same team. That being said, not many people that are really, really, really strong who actually think that Eddie Hall has the record. So you would just understand. And this is no disrespect to Eddie Hall. He's one of my absolute favorites. I love the guy. He is one of the best of all time. I mean, he's an absolute elite, world-class, all-time strongman. I just think that 501 is that record when you consider all of this stuff. So we'd love to hear more from you. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, other takes that you think I need to hear, bring it on. Let's talk. Let's have a debate. Thank you so much for watching. Have a championship day.